in that time, which would be today and the time that Christ comes and these things all happen, people are up in spirit world, spirit paradise, or spirit prison, depending on your life and this how you lived your life, are trying to learn the gospel. And we believe in order to be saved, using the Christian term, you have to be baptized. And we use Nicodemus. Nicodemus asked Jesus, what do I have to do to be saved? He says, you must be born of the Spirit or born of the water and of the Spirit. So what we do is we baptize in proxy of those that are dead. So they're given an opportunity in the next life, in the spirit world where they're at currently, to accept that ordinance and take the next step in whatever that may be up there. Now, people think that the Mormons baptize the dead in order to build their rolls, and that's a bunch of garbage. The LDS faith does not include baptisms for the dead as part of their memberships on this earth. We have been sued for doing it. The Jewish community sued us, and we stopped it. You'll get some zealous members of the church that think they need to, Michael Jackson died, let's go do his work and he can be baptized and Tom Petty just passed away, let's get his temple. The church frowns upon that, and if they catch the names, they will stop it and shut it down. Out of respect for those that are here. We respect all religions. We truly believe that every person in this world has a right to believe and exercise that belief in their own way. And we're not here to force you to believe our way. Just because we've done a baptism for an ancestor does not mean they're Mormon. It does not mean that they've been taken out of purgatory in the Catholic faith and moved somewhere else, or they've been pulled from one aspect of a death belief to another. We believe that they're all hanging out in the spirit world. And we believe they're waiting for these things to be done. And we do it. And it allows them to have that opportunity. And so there's a huge, not a huge, I would say, a discussion among non-members that say, that's not right, that's not fair. Well, depending on who you are. My personal belief is the person's no longer here. It doesn't affect them in this life. But if a family member asked me not to do it, then I would respect them and not do it. My mother's parents were Catholic, and her siblings asked my mom not to do it, and she didn't. She's holding off. My father's parents were obviously not members of the church, but we have done the work for them because my father's sister is also a member of the church and said, go ahead. So my father went and did all the work for his parents. So, but yes, baptisms for the dead are done in the Mormon temple. There's a baptismal font within the LDS temples. Every temple's got one. 2 people go down into the baptismal font like you've seen any other church do. The Baptist will put his arm to the square, says in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, I baptize you for and on behalf of John Doe who is dead. And they get baptized. And that's it. And then they go to the next one. In the name of John Picard or the name of whatever. And then if it's for women, then the Baptist who's a male, because the baptisms are done by the priesthood. If it's a female name, then females will come down into the baptismal font. And the Baptist will baptize them for and on behalf of whatever the female's name is. And they will do that.
So is that kind of baptism for a whole group at one time, or do they set it up on a one-on-one basis?
Every congregation, now for those who don't know, a congregation is called a ward. Within the LDS faith, the basic congregation is a ward. Multiple wards make a stake. Multiple stakes make an area. Multiple areas make up the church. So every ward will take one night a month and go to their local temple and take all the youth, and they will do baptisms for the dead with the youth. Every stake will take one day a month and set up for the whole stake to do it. And so you volunteers, you can go. If you're recently, the LDS faith has started letting any child over the age of 12 go into temples for the purpose of baptisms with their parents. So I've taken my children to the temple with names that we have prepared and said, hey, let's take you to the temple and we'll do baptisms. We'll do 30 of them. Then we all go home. Well, we got to dinner first, and then we go home. So it can happen both ways. You do need to call the temple and set it up. You can't just show up. You call the temple and schedule that specific ordinance because it takes a certain number of people to make it happen. They want to make sure they have everybody available that needs to be there.
You said those who have not accepted the Christian faith in the way that the Mormon church sees it go to a sort of, I think you said holding area, not purgatory though, similar to that. So do you think in the faith that non-Mormons cannot go to heaven as a Mormon would?
Now, on that side of it, in the spirit world, there's 2 places, a spirit prison and spirit paradise. Now, for us, that is the go-between between when Christ himself died and when Christ comes back. Until that event of him returning happens, spirit world is heaven, okay, for the standard Christian belief. If you've lived a good life and God judges you to have been good enough, he'll put you in the spirit world, or in the spirit paradise within the spirit world, to be taught and to learn and to grow. If you've lived a life that is not consistent with what God thinks you should have done, then you end up in spirit prison within the spirit world. The short answer is the spirit prison is a short-term situation and is not an eternal stand. It is a short-term issue. We believe that once Christ comes back to the earth and has his 1,000-year reign, he will then pass judgment, and then every person will be assigned a degree of glory. In the Bible, it talks about my Father has many mansions, and we believe that to be a fact. We've broken into 3 levels of glory, or 3 levels of heaven: the celestial, the telestial, and the terrestrial. And then you have hell, which is outer darkness. So that'd be 4 levels, actually. 4 levels. And once you have made all of the decisions you're going to make, and Christ passes judgment, or God passes judgment on you, then you'll be assigned to one of those 4 kingdoms. And that's where you'll spend eternity. But we do believe that in order to make it to the celestial kingdom, the highest degree, you will have to have been baptized a member of the LDS faith, sealed in a temple, or at least had taken out your endowments. Otherwise, you can't get there. But just because you've done that does not guarantee that you're going to make it. We recently had a member of our 70, which is a high authority within our church, excommunicated from the LDS faith, which means he's lost all of his eternal blessings within the LDS faith. He's no longer a member of our church. He can still come to church, but he's no longer able to go to the temple. He's no longer able to be over any meetings, responsible for anything. He just shows up as a standard parishioner to pray and to worship with us as we would.
Who is it that makes those decisions? You said those were the bishops?
So it's an individual basis. If it is, depending on the level of the sin, adultery, pornography, murder, typically what happens is the person that's going to be excommunicated sits before a peer of 12. 6 of those 12 advocate for him to stay, and 6 of those 12 advocate for him to leave. And then it's called a high council. And those 12 members hear out what this person did. Are they repentant? Do they feel remorseful? Or have they just made a decision and leaving the church is the best thing for them? That's how a person is excommunicated from the church. That council decides at that point, hey, you're an apostate. You're teaching against the church. You're pushing against the church. You're dragging people away from the church. Just leave the church. You obviously don't want to be a member, so go. That sounds harsh, but that's my view. If you've committed adultery and you think it's wrong, then you still might get excommunicated, but in a year, let's talk and see where you're at in a year. Are you still committing adultery, or have you stopped? And are you living a life that's more consistent? And if you are, then let's bring you back into the church. So even after you're excommunicated, you can come back. There's always a way to return to God.
Are those 12 from the priesthood, or are they also from the Women's Relief Organization? Who's in that group?
That's all priesthood.
And is that the same process for male and female members of the church?
Majority of the female happens with the local clergy, so a bishop and his counselors usually handle that. If it's a grievous enough sin, then it can go up to the high council. But it's more common that the local bishop handles the female side of the disciplinary actions that need to be done. I don't know why.
So now I'm going to jump us way back again, something we talked about before. Think about families, and at the very beginning you said, I can't remember your exact words, but you said the mainstream Mormons, not the polygamous side. That, of course, was one of the many questions that came from our listeners. For many, hearing the word Mormon makes them think of polygamy. Can you explain the history there?
Sure. The LDS faith was created back in 1836. Later, after the church was created, Joseph Smith, the prophet, the founder of our faith, was told to practice polygamy. Now, polygamy does not mean necessary sexual relations. Again, we have an eternal view of life. We look at the eternal aspect of it. A man cannot make it to the top kingdom, the celestial kingdom, without a wife, and a wife can't make it there without a husband. So the purpose of polygamy was an eternal thing, not a world, a temporal view. So yes, Joseph Smith practiced polygamy. Now, it was a new concept. We believe that the church was started because a young boy asked a question, and we believe that God the Father and his son Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph Smith in a grove of trees and told him, hey, we got some work for you to do, and that's where it all started. So Joseph Smith had a question, it was answered, and then we believe that God allows us We have a saying in the church, a man commanded in all things is a slothful servant. You should not have to be commanded in everything. You should be you should ask questions. You should wonder. You should have concerns. And you should go to God. So Joseph Smith practiced polygamy. Other members of the church, specific members, were also asked to practice polygamy until Utah wanted to become a state. And the government said, hey, polygamists, that's wrong. It's a horrible thing that you're doing. We think it's bad. Stop it. And the LDS Church wouldn't because they felt God wanted them to do it. And so they continued it until the day that God said, okay, you can stop now. There's a lot of arguments from people that say the Mormon Church changes for the times. No, trust me, the church would have loved to have made, I think, decisions sooner rather than later. But we believe God guides us and says, you're not ready for this, so we're going to wait till you are ready, or the world's not ready for that, so we're going to stop it. Polygamy is one of those things. The world's not ready for polygamy, so the church stopped it because God told the leadership to stop it. Because it's very possible that men were becoming carnal and saying, hey, I've got 3 wives. I'm going to go, I've got Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night covered. So God said, hey, you know what? You guys can't handle it. You're too immature. I'm stopping it. It's over. Today there is sects of the LDS faith, break-offs or no. They're in no way, shape, or form connected to the Salt Lake City world headquarters based church that I'm with. But you do hear of Warren Jeffs and the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ or Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ. And they practice it on their own, but they perverted the practice. They don't do it for eternal aspects like we did. And people argue old men perverts back in the days, perverts sleeping with women. And I've always thought, and it's been a challenge for me, but I've always thought if they did, then why didn't those women all have lots of kids? Joseph Smith wasn't known to have any children other than through his wife, Emma. And he had, I want to say, several wives that he was sealed to. Again, for the eternal belief that families are forever and that we're all brothers and sisters and that when we die, in order to make it to the celestial kingdom, you must have a spouse to get there.
You mentioned the different sects. That was another question someone came up with. Thanks to the various reality TV shows, I guess, that exist about polygamist relationships. How do you respond to that?
People believe what they want. They practice their beliefs how they want, and they will hang their hat on a belief system that suits them, whatever name that may be. So when I hear the person say they're on my mission, I actually served with a kid who came from a polygamous family that broke off from the polygamous group and converted to the LDS faith. And he was one of the children born through polygamy. And I asked him about it, and he told me, he says, yeah, I have 4 moms and all these other things going on. And I said, why'd you leave? And he said, because it wasn't what we thought, and we didn't believe it. And so when I hear people talk about like Warren Jeffs and stuff like that, you have break-offs of every religion. Not to disparage any one religion, but, Seventh-day Adventists were a break-off of one group. Catholics, depends if you're Greek or Roman. Lutherans, for Martin Luther, who was a break-off from the Catholic Church. Then you have Baptists, East Coast, West Coast, Bible Belt. So each religion will adopt their own tenet of beliefs and practice them as they see appropriate. The Church of Christ used to be the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and changed their names because they no longer believed the same as they did when they started. So they changed their name and became part of a Christian coalition and have moved on. So when people tell me that Mormons are polygamists, no, they're not. I mean, at least not my Mormon group. The church I belong to has 14 million members, and there's no polygamy in that church that the church condones. I mean, if people practice it, that's because they're going against what the church teaches.
You mentioned that polygamy had stopped because perhaps the world wasn't ready for it. One of the questions that someone asked was, if it were legal across the USA, would the LDS Church choose to return to the practice of plural marriage? Or does it not have anything to do with legality?
Great question. I can't answer. I can't speak for the church that way. My opinion would be that just because it's legal doesn't make it right. And so I think that the church would make their own decision. An example I use is currently the Boy Scouts of America. Church in its stand on homosexual activities. I was convinced when the Boy Scouts of America changed their stand and said, yes, openly gay leaders and scouts, something that they'd fought for decades. I thought for sure the church would walk away, and they didn't. Today, the Boy Scouts of America said, hey, now we're going to let girls into the scouting program. And in the LDS Church, the Boy Scouts of America is an all-boy activities. And so, again, the Boy Scouts of America, at its core,